Good afternoon, dear friends. Welcome to the Sales in Recruiting course. Today is our first session where we'll discuss what's wrong with your hiring funnel. Why do you need to take a sales course in recruiting? The fact is that the recruiting funnel is a very powerful analytical tool that immediately shows you where your problems lie when working with job postings. The funnel works similarly to sales. You have potential candidates at the input and hires at the output. The art is in building a funnel that can consistently turn candidates into hires. This is very important and in high demand because companies don't like recruiting that feels like magic. They prefer recruiting as a system with clear results, resources, candidates, and analytics, not vague promises of maybe someday we'll find you someone. This is the course website. Let me tell you about myself. My name is Mike Pritula. This is a list of companies I've worked for as a recruiter, recruiting executive, HR director, and I started by filling positions independently, then built recruiting systems, sourcing systems, and sales systems. I reached a point where in companies like IDEO, we had systems that practically guaranteed hires, both in that company and in IDEO. These were unknown brands. These were companies no one had heard of, but nevertheless, we filled positions with the best candidates at very reasonable costs. And overall, these people worked effectively. In my work, I rely on best practices. As you'll see even today in this course, I draw on the best developments as well as my personal experience. If anyone wants, you can write about your position in the chat, in the YouTube video description, anywhere. We'll get to know each other. And about the diplomas. This course has 6 sessions with 6 homework assignments on which I'll give feedback. If you complete them well, we'll issue you a diploma. We issue the diploma on the CD platform, a cool platform popular worldwide. Google, for example, also issues diplomas, so there you go. What does the course program look like? Today we'll familiarize ourselves with the funnel concept. In the second session, we'll talk about how to transform the hiring funnel into a talent attraction flywheel. In the third session, we'll discuss the nuances of copywriting and storytelling, how to write compelling texts to interest candidates, especially passive candidates. In the fourth session, we'll explore how to interact with candidates and give them effective feedback. In the fifth session, we'll break down how to deal with problematic vacancies, what types of problems exist, and how to solve them. And in the sixth session, we'll study correspondence with the most passive candidates and how to activate and engage them. It's very necessary then. Today we'll talk about auditing the company's recruiting system, what KPIs exist, what the new modern approach in recruiting called the candidate journey map is, and what a recruiting funnel is and what it tells us. So let's begin. A modern talent attraction system works efficiently and effectively when it's built as a system. I've had the opportunity to build recruiting virtually from scratch 3 times, and 3 times I managed to achieve results that ultimately satisfied the hiring managers. Only when the entire system was built, fully implemented processes, templates, trained recruiters, automation tools, analytics, and so on. This auto-evaluation of recruiters and so forth. Only then can you almost guarantee results, and you can understand what results you'll generate with your system. For example, when I built the system at STB TV channel, I already knew clearly. Each recruiter closes an average of 10 vacancies. If we need to close more vacancies, we just need to add a few more recruiters. I knew what the timelines for closing positions would be, what level of candidates we'd get, and so on. It was a system that consistently delivered results. I built the same thing at Preplay. It's an IT company, a startup with high requirements, and there a recruiter closed 3 positions a month. Then I built a similar system at ID. Even higher requirements than at Preplay, because they were preparing a platform for a large investment business. There, a recruiter closed 2 to 3 positions a month, but the level of candidates there was also such that the CEO, who was also the company owner, was simply thrilled. Because literally before building the system, he was hiring just anyone who showed any interest in the company and was generally not very satisfied with the employees. He was condescending about it, saying, "What else can we afford? I'm nothing, nobody knows us." When we built the system with the recruiting team, he raised the bar so high that he simply said, "Give me the best of the best possible." We gave them to him without an employer brand. We set up the brand. And what's my point? This system today already has its framework, boundaries, and is described. You don't need to invent it, as I had to do several times, when I was always looking for what else we could do, what we could add, what we could implement to make it work effectively. What other points? It exists. It's described and available to you via the link. First of all, there's a link to a Google document, or more specifically, a Google spreadsheet. You can follow the link to get it and conduct an audit of what you have, what you don't have, and what you need to implement. And it's now available on our Papa HR platform, which I specifically developed for the Academy. It's an online platform with checklists. Among other things, there's an audit checklist for the recruiting system. If you're registered, you'll simply find it. If you're not registered, there's open registration. Just go in, register, and fill out the checklist. You'll get a report, you'll get a percentage score, and you'll get both an overall score and scores for all areas. Can you believe it? So you'll understand. And you'll get a set of recommendations. You'll know what you need to implement from what you don't have yet. Recruiting as a system that sells job openings is also about properly managing recruiting metrics, that is, what are called KPIs. So here's a list of KPIs to keep an eye on, working with which will allow you to manage and improve your recruiting. Let's move on. The next very interesting tool that we're focusing on in this course, it's more about sales. How to make candidates want to work with you. How to do it even without having a brand like we had at Preply at the time. Now, I think it's already a more recognizable company. Some time has passed. There are more employees working there too. When I started working there, there were 45 employees. I was the 46th. I didn't know the brand. Even I didn't know the brand. They wrote to me, reached out. Who are you? I've never heard of you. Well, we're a startup, kind of like Booking.com, but for language learning. And we've even got Arthur Costin as an investor. Okay, all right, let's talk. And we wrote to candidates, we explained who Preply was. They didn't know. But we managed in a short period of time, through communication with the candidate, to build such an impression and understanding that they were saying, wow, you're interesting. Let's talk to you guys anyway. And by the time it came to talking with our co-founders, the final stage of selection, the candidates were already very interested. We hired for insight. We ended up hiring people from Booking.com. I had a head of recruitment from Booking.com. We hired people from other well-known companies. And it wasn't an issue for them that they were joining a startup. But it's the same at Ideal. When Ideal wrote to me, I knew nothing about them. Okay, with Preply, you could at least find articles about them on the internet. They weren't as well known as Grammarly or MacPaw or Alliance or Ring, but you could at least find some information about them on the internet, Google them, find some published articles, some interviews, funding rounds they had raised. But when I went to work for ID, they had no information except for negative reviews. And these reviews were already irrelevant. They were from times when the company was in rented apartments, and the conditions really weren't the best. But the company had moved to a beautiful office. The company had created a number of interesting HR practices, a good benefits package. No one knew about this at all, zero. It wasn't mentioned anywhere. The company had done something to improve its brand, but hadn't built the brand. When they wrote to me saying they had studied my experience at Preply and needed me to replicate it, I didn't know about them. I said, well, let's talk. I knew so little that when they told me, let's work for us, here's an offer. You want this much money, please? I said, can I go to your office and talk to your executives to understand what they think, what their needs are, how I can be helpful? They said, yes, okay. I went, talked, saw the company, saw the executives. They gave me a tour of the office. I realized that there was something to work with here. There was potential to unlock. And over the course of a year, we really did a lot. Eventually hired an employer brand manager, conducted research, and so on. The point is, you can build such work with a completely unknown company, without any employer brand, without any big money, and in a relatively short period of time if you know what to do. And here's one tool that will help you build such an outstanding candidate experience that people will want to come work for you, even if no one knows about you. It's a tool called Candidate Journey Map. That is, a map of the candidate's journey. The tool is still so little known and little used here that most of the materials about it are purely in English. I'm saying we actually have, I've been very much involved in international HR for the last year. I'm interested in HR in Spanish, in Portuguese, in French, in German, in Polish, in Vietnamese, in Korean, in Chinese, in Japanese, in Turkish, in other languages. And when I go there and research, well, let's say in huge shock that progressive systemic HR practices in the world exist only in English. Well, it's good that over the last 10 years it has appeared in Russian. Now it's being quickly translated into Ukrainian, and we're involved in that process too. But it's practically non-existent in other languages. So somehow it turns out that English is the main language. So, let's get back to our candidate journey. What is it? The tool itself is not new. It wasn't invented in recruiting. It was created by marketers for working with customers. Marketers call it the customer journey map. It involves trying to, as they say, put yourself in the customer's shoes and walk in their shoes along the path a customer takes from the moment of almost complete ignorance about the company to the point where the customer becomes a user or buyer of the company's products and when they part ways with the company. The idea behind going through this journey? The idea is to evaluate from the client's perspective. What are my thoughts as a client? What are my goals as a client? What are my desires as a client? What steps do I go through? What difficulties do I encounter? And most importantly, what emotions do I experience at each stage? Marketers have long understood that customers stay with a company when they have positive emotions towards it. Take Apple, for example. I'm committed to Apple, and we've had our ups and downs. I was one of the very first iPhone users in Ukraine. When the iPhone was first introduced, it was incredibly difficult to buy and obtain one. They were all locked to American carriers. But I was very lucky because my colleague was in the US for a conference, he bought me an iPhone, and I found out on forums how to unlock them. I was one of the first in Ukraine to unlock an iPhone, using a method called the Steve Jobs call. Those in the know might have heard of it, but the first iPhone I used it and it didn't work for me. I sold it, switched to Android. Then another iPhone came out, I tried it, used it, sold it, switched to Android. I've switched from iPhone to Android 5 times. So an iPhone would come out, okay, let's see, didn't like it. But I still ended up sticking with the iPhone. I gave in, I switched to a MacBook. Although at first I didn't really like the MacBook either, with its menu at the top, some strange dock at the bottom. Well, now I'm fully on the ecosystem. I tried other smartwatches too, but I came back to the Apple Watch. Why? Because my emotions when interacting with this brand are consistently positive. Everything is just great, I like everything. And marketers have realized this, they're trying to build those emotions. Successful modern businesses like Apple, Tesla, Starbucks, McDonald's, Facebook, digital businesses, Amazon, these are businesses built on positive customer emotions. This tool can be applied to recruiting. You can take all the stages of recruiting, and it's commonly used later, and HR will talk about that too. And look at it from a recruiting perspective. What stages does a candidate go through? Not ours, not from the company's point of view. From the company's perspective, it's clear. There's job posting, pre-screening, screening, final screening, decision-making, offer, onboarding. That's it. From the company's point of view, these are the standard recruiting funnels. You know them, you have them outlined. They're entered into your applicant tracking system, ATS. But from the candidate's perspective, these are actually slightly different steps. And they need to be understood too. For example, they're outlined here. And I arrive and park my car, but where do I park it? For instance, when I worked at Apple, our office was located at 13 Kreshchatyk, the very center of Kiev. Maidan, that's it. And if you don't know where to park your car, you won't be able to, because parking is prohibited there. So simply sending the candidate a map explaining where they can comfortably or even freely park their car already improves the experience. So, park the car, then get to the reception. It happens that in some companies the office is confusingly far away. Sometimes they shoot videos of walking to the office to the reception from some transportation hub to help the candidate. And when it's sent to the candidate, they say, wow, cool. I understand how to get there and won't get lost. Then the office. It's also a basic thing many companies don't do, but Google, for example. When they started improving their recruitment process, they introduced a tool called VoxPop, Voice of the People. And they started collecting feedback from candidates about what they liked, what they didn't like, what could be added. And Google realized they needed to give candidates a tour and improve the candidate experience. I also, for example, in the company ID. For this, I did the same thing in gaming at the STB TV channel, and before that at Alpha Bank. I'm just a fan of beautiful offices myself. For me, it's always been, if a company has a cool office, that's wow. And for me, starting with Alpha Bank, we had a cool office there. I just wanted to show off to the candidate to share my joy. So as a recruiter at first, then as head of recruitment and HR director, I had a desire to showcase the office. I always gave office tours. We used to do these tours, and people would always say, wow, that's cool. Not many companies actually show off their office. They bring you to reception for a meeting, then show you out, but we'd show you our kitchen, locker room, gym, conference rooms, and so on. Not many people do that, and so on. So all these stages look different from the candidate's perspective. It's really great to use a tool to analyze the candidate's journey map. By the way, there's an article about this at the link. Fortunately, there are good examples of how companies build these maps, which you can use as a starting point to work with. One of them is the best example I could find. I translated it for you with a description of all the steps. And you can already select and adapt it to your needs. This example looks like this. It assumes the first stage is planning to leave. The candidate starts their journey to us by realizing at some point, damn, I'm fed up with everything. That manager isn't developing me. My salary hasn't been reviewed in a long time. I spend too much time at work, I'm sick of it. I want to focus on my personal life. This is the first stage. So there are certain triggers here, certain actions. A person goes on LinkedIn and thinks, I should update my profile. It's been a while since I posted my accomplishments there. They think about where the pay is good right now. Feelings? There are some concerns and fears, but also some positive thoughts like, finally, I'll get rid of this bad manager. And the company has opportunities at this stage to improve interactions with the candidate. The company can use timely advertising, for example. This is just one example. It's advisable to have about 5 of them. And here we didn't have a description of the opportunities in the original. I've already added that. The company has opportunities at every stage to influence candidates. Hey friend, come join us. Let's get to know each other. Learn about our awesome company. By the way, I recently came across a company's website. Listen, it impressed me so much. I even posted a link to their webpage in our Academy's chat. I'll show you now. Put yourself in the shoes of a candidate who's planning to leave their company. And here they are on the page. This is a company that handles the candidate's journey map correctly. I'm sure they put themselves in the candidate's shoes and thought about what the candidate should see when visiting the page, what thoughts they might have, what we should communicate to them, how we should position ourselves. The Monzo company, I'd actually never heard of them before. I stumbled upon this bank purely by chance while looking for something I needed. And I ended up on this page. I fell in love with it. First, they use emojis, which is stylish and trendy. They immediately show their job openings and benefits. They explain what kind of company they are, that they're building a bank. They show where their office is located. They have a video, 4 minutes long. I'll mute it so it doesn't interfere. In this video, employees talk about the bank, about the company, and it's already engaging. So I'm already getting acquainted and possibly developing some positive feelings. Next, there are just the open positions. And then what really touched me, the benefits. It's very nicely laid out with emojis, some cool bullet points, clear details. What do they offer? Work from home, clear information about leads, training, specific numbers, absolutely concrete details, and much more. And even answers to questions. Well, this is already advertising for their app. Next, if I go to a job listing, it's also beautifully done. Listen, there's also, as they say, something to look at. I don't see any other HR vacancies. Well, let's look at some kind of operational role. First of all, probably because it's a top position, there's no salary listed everywhere. For simpler positions like executive assistant, there is a salary. So they're trying to be as transparent as possible. They describe their mission, again with a heart emoji, it's really great. They describe who they are, who they're looking for, what you'll be involved in, why should you apply. What does the interview process look like? Even with the duration in minutes. Can you imagine? They've thought it through so thoroughly from a person's perspective. What someone thinks about, like how long will it take to communicate with them? How will I interact with them? Please, they describe it. Our interview is a 4-step process. Initial call 30 minutes. Our team lead will call you and have an introductory conversation. Then you'll have a task. You'll need to complete a task. Then you'll have 2 45-minute interviews, one on values and one on your role. And you'll have a call with one of our top executives to check for chemistry. In general, your interview will take 4 to 6 weeks, but if you have any questions, write, ask, we'll be happy to answer them. Next is compensation detail, then equal rights. And the response system is simple, basically not super complicated. You can prioritize your resume in many ways if you want to. Well, and qualification questions to weed out the candidates at once. And identity. I think for more, let's look at more serious director positions. Maybe there will be even fewer such questions. Yes, you see, they are a little bit less, some basic, so as not to overload a person, and only 3 of them are compulsory. Clearly, if you're a US resident and there's some other stuff, that's it, great site. And it's clear to see that the site is built from understanding people's needs and how to create a cool experience for them. See the interesting steps of care planning, market research, job searching, researching companies, responding to expectations. When you respond to the interview, consideration of the offer. In fact, this map here, well, how many here? About 7-8 steps, you can lay it out still detailed. This is what product managers or marketers do in a company. Surely if you work for an IT company or a non-IT company but with advanced marketing, surely your guys are probably doing this in relation to your clients. Why don't you do that for your candidates? I used to prepare sales pitches before this map. I have more pitches here than in this map. Here in these steps, actions, thoughts, and feelings are not listed as triggers. But it's spelled out what tools the company has, it's spelled out what affects each stage, and what you can do. In all the companies I've worked for, I've tried to build a system that would sell the job to the candidate not when I met with them. And worst of all, you know how some companies, the way they do things. They're the whole process of interacting with the candidate, evaluating the candidate, like, let's see what you got. And then, when they are ready to make an offer, they say, well, now finally we will tell you how great we are. And that's if they do it, because some companies think, we're so cool, let's find it ourselves. Why we're cool, they say, and why do you want to work for us? While not even letting the candidate know anything, not even making sure the candidate can find somewhere. That's why some companies are so yes. I'm an advocate that we sell at all stages, even to people we don't want, so that people come to us already motivated, so that they can show themselves to the best of their ability in the interview. Because if a person is brilliant, if a person is talented, if a person is a nugget, but they don't put themselves out there in an interview, you just won't know about it. Because he lacked motivation, you didn't sell him a job opening to prove himself. And someone else has him at 50%, they'll find him. So you don't need to sell, then when you've made a job offer, pitch at all stages. What are some other tools that help here? Understanding your candidate's avatar is very helpful. Well, avatar means portrait, and they say in English it is avatar, or they say customer persona, translated as portrait. It's really cool when you're absolutely clear on who your target candidate is. Here you go. It's been a discovery for me a few times when I've been out with a new company, learning who our typical candidate is, because it's always different people. In banking, and even in different banks, it will be a different portrait. In banking, this is one such portrait. On television, it's different. In an IT company of thirds. Fourth, in a startup, is the fourth portrait. So it's very useful to sort things out. We have when we at IDLs were looking for a brand manager to manage the employer brand. We gave test assignments, we paid money for them, we asked people to name the cost of their hour and indicate how many hours they spent on the task. And we wanted to see that people knew how to work with branding tools and knew how to understand our target audience. Here, by the way, one of the candidates described a very cool portrait of the target audience. He made him up, so it's not this man in the picture, but he has shown that he can understand. And why is that necessary? In a portrait, when we describe it, we can realize the two most important things that from a sales perspective are important. It's what a person most wants and what a person most doesn't want. Here is knowing the pains and needs of your target audience to build sales of your employer brand. Again, the tool, it's popular in marketing, meaning examples of target audience portraits can be found a bunch from different businesses and so on. Accordingly, when you have envisioned the ideal candidate, when you have envisioned your candidate's path, you can build their recruiting processes around that path. That is, they will be synchronized as much as possible. And then candidates will, even if you have competition with other companies, be more likely to end up with you. When we at Peliot ID built these processes, we had a lot of stories from recruiters. When a candidate was taking job offer at another company, but our recruiters interrupted him. That is, the candidate accepted, well, listen, come and talk, let me consult you on your job offer and persuaded, then come to us. There was even a situation where a person went to work for a company with a stronger brand, more successful, but we still rehired him, and he came to us. We had a candidate, he went out to the company, forgot on the Genius gene, went out to Genesis, worked there for a week because we were dragging out the recruiting process for a long time, and we did poach him, he came out to our ID. While Genesis is a top company with a well-known brand, the huge IDL was a small company with no brand back then. But he really liked the way we lined his path as a candidate. That is, we bribed him so much with the hiring process that he was willing to leave a company with a cool brand, just because you try, if you have a hiring process, how you work afterward. But he still works for the company in this one. I know he works there, seems pretty good. I'll sketch some marketing examples in this presentation as well. Customer journey map. Maybe you can take some ideas from marketing and apply them to your business. HR is such a profession, interesting. In terms of borrowing from marketing, you can take a lot of cool stuff. Well, and marketers, they're cool to develop. There are even travel maps like this, a little funny. It is useful to study them. Accordingly, once the candidate path is ready, only you have studied, analyzed all the steps. You can build your sales in recruiting. It's important to realize that yes, there is a wild card on one side. I've already shared 2 cards of mine, and what I found online is cool, but they are universal, you may have them and will likely have some different ones. You can work in different countries, in different cities, in different industries, in different markets, in different companies, in different sizes, and with different people. So it's good to have some samples that I'm giving you, but it would be great if you could customize it as much as possible, build your sales process and train your recruiters on it. Because at the end of the day, recruiters need to have a perfect picture for themselves of how your candidates behave when they're looking for a job and how you influence them. Therefore, your sales process should be synchronized with all stages of the recruiting journey. We'll be talking a lot about selling in this course in the next few sessions. You'll have a lot of examples, some ideas, some fly hacks, some templates, but you need to customize for yourself. Because even my job turns out to be at 4 or 5 different companies. It was a slightly different experience. That is, nowhere were there absolutely identical processes, absolutely identical approaches. There was always something different. The next point was the candidate's perspective. Yes, from the candidate's point of view, it is a map of the candidate's journey. From a company's perspective, it's called a funnel. Because for a company, there are a lot of candidates at the front door. For a company, recruiting is like a contest. When I worked on STB TV channel, it was very interesting to see how the competition in some talent show like X Factor. The X Factor had somewhere around 50,000 applicants at the entrance. Imagine then on stage, I can't remember, 12 people or 14 and 1 winner. Imagine what kind of a blowback that would be. And it was interesting to see how it all works, what processes there are to choose the participants of a TV show from 50,000 questionnaires, and then they are selected there. Recruiting is a very similar story. An interesting TV show won't be interesting if there isn't 5,000 at the door. I mean, if there are, 2 mediocre singers at the entrance and they pick 10, it's going to be boring. A cool TV show only comes along when there's a huge flood of input. And there really was a whole lot of maneuvering going on. These people have been screened, called back, have been castings, tent castings. They just watch them in droves, very quickly, briefly, to choose someone to watch then in more detail. There's a whole series of stages. Recruiting should also be built from the company's point of view, like some kind of contest where there are a lot of people at the entrance, and going through the stages we get less and less and less, and then we get to the exit. Sometimes recruiting is also seen as a pipeline, a conduit in which many pipes flow together. Each pipe represents some sort of channel, LinkedIn, job site, employee referrals, your own base, and fill your funnel. There is an image like that too, also interesting, you can hear about it too. Another look at recruiting. Here's one I like, it's called Infinity Loop or Infinite Loop, Infinite Loop. For many companies, they realize two simple things. The first thing is that recruiting is not the last point of working with a candidate, then the team management interactions with them continue, and recruiting needs to be integrated into management. This is the first of its kind. The second story, a lot of people, especially big companies, have realized the next thing, that the world is round, that the number of candidates is limited. That treating people like waste material isn't worth it, and it's not very profitable. They treat every employee who left as an alumnus, they even do special alum programs, and they continue to interact with them, either to have them return or to keep them as ambassadors. I once consulted for an IT company, an outsourcing company, on recruiting issues, HR matters, and solving problems they had in personnel management. And I liked that they really treated the people who worked for them as active contacts. They say people who have worked for us and left. And we have a lot of people leaving IT outsourcing. They have a higher turnover rate than product companies, so there's a standard turnover rate of 20-25%. They say that our former employees are, first of all, people we are willing to consider taking back, because we offer stability. A person can go to a startup and the startup might fail. A person can go to a product company and might get laid off. Yes, we pay a little less than others, but we pay consistently. That is, we're willing to welcome them back to their home port, to give them stability again. That's one point. Second, they operate in the B2B segment, that is for corporate clients. And they say that every employee who has worked for us can bring us an outsourced client, their current company, to give us some projects, or simply recommend us. So we want the employee to have a good opinion of us. And third, they bring in former employees for projects. For example, to evaluate a candidate, that is, set up projects, evaluate candidates, create courses, act as mentors, so former employees can do side jobs for this company on one-off tasks. And this is a great story when a company builds relationships like this. So it doesn't view layoffs as an endpoint, but rather as a cyclical process. And this company I'm talking about, for instance, wishes former employees happy birthday. They organize meetings for ex-employees, they're building a community. I also consulted them, brainstorming ideas for them. They're working on these aspects. But there are many examples like this. Intel operates this way too. This is another variation of candidate, then employee, then candidate again. And another perspective on the recruiting system that we'll talk about in the next session is the flywheel. It's when you start to see the funnel a little differently. Here's the funnel. It has a cone-like shape where we have many candidates at the top and hires at the bottom, and it's assumed that all the people who are at the top are kind of discarded. So companies filter them out, and that's it. Then they hire someone. Again, the modern approach is that those people who have left the process at some stage, you need to keep in touch with them because they're not necessarily bad or unsuitable. And you need to view it more as a constant rotation, as if your company is like Jupiter or Saturn. A planet has an orbit. Around this orbit revolve satellites. These are candidates, and some sooner or later end up in your company. That is, you need to build it in such a way that talented employees are circling around you. It would be like an external talent pool that periodically tries out for different positions, gets feedback, and improves themselves. Here, for example, is how Google operates. Google states that they have been in talks with some candidates for 10 years. Either there's no compatibility between the vacancy and the candidate, or the candidate isn't interested yet. But Google keeps circling them. And on the other hand, they're also interested in all the candidates who didn't fit. That is, they maintain communication with them. It's called a flywheel in English. The concept authors are marketers from HubSpot, a well-known CRM company. But now in marketing, this approach is popular, and many are adopting it, and accordingly, recruiters are adopting these marketers' approaches. Another interesting approach in modern recruiting is the focus on what is called inbound recruiting. Inbound recruiting, i.e., not classic outbound, when you have to search for candidates. And inbound is when you build an approach where candidates are constantly being drawn to you, and you just choose. This also intersects with the sales concept we're learning in this course. What are some other innovations happening in this area? The term candidate relationship management (CRM) appears similar to that in marketing. Well, by the way, it then turns into employee relationship management, where we continue to manage relationships. Candidate journey, talent pools, especially external talent pools, and eras where employees act as brand ambassadors for the company as an employer. It's a novelty. Well, as I said, this candidate journey map should then turn into an employee journey map, so it's useful to continue that afterwards, also called employee experience. It's helpful to evaluate how the employee progresses within the company. What are their emotions? How can we improve the employee experience further, not stopping at recruiting? Homework. So, there are several options to choose from here to use one of the tools that we've looked at today as applied to your company and comment on it in words. The second session will be about how to transform the hiring funnel into a talent attraction flywheel. That's all. Thank you to everyone who joined me online today. Thank you to everyone who signed up for this course. For those who haven't joined yet, please know that the doors are still open. Come and join us. I'd be happy to share my knowledge with you. Yes, I see your thank you, Xenia. I'll be glad to share all the developments and best tools with you. That's all for today. Goodbye, bye-bye. See you soon.